And when I was telling them the history of this other knight that was there, because the knight character made their history check, I was like, and he was buried with the dragon lance. They all went, he said the name of the campaign, said. And I was like, wait till we finish this. And I do the rap that tells the story of what happened.
Oh no. Please say that you'll perform that for the Jaunty Mantis as
Well, I'll have to get
stretch
the
goal.
AI to write it because I have no talent as a lyricist, so that'll make it even more awkward. Oh, it starts with, yo, we're heading to Kryn, land of the Dragonlance, where the Dragon Queen's army's got people in a trance. What? The war of the lance is on, the stakes are high. Hero rise up, ain't no time to be shy. The knights of Solamnia riding tall and true, with the mages of high sorcery casting spells like they do. It's a shadow of the Dragon Queen, battles on the front line, if you know what I mean. Okay, I'm gonna navigate away from this tab,
I don't.
Otherwise it's just gonna keep going on. Yeah, let's do this.
All right, welcome and well met, all ye dungeon masters, game mothers, and player characters. It's the Jaunty Mantis, and this is a tabletop role-playing game podcast where curious nerds ask each other creative questions. I'm one of those curious nerds. My name is Maddie, and I have with me my beautiful best friend, Jesse.
I'm rapping about Dragonlance today. Hello.
Oh boy, Jesse's going to be inserting rap lyrics generated by AI about Dragonlance throughout the misadventure that is this episode.
No, this is a main episode. I'll save that for the bonus ones.
Oh,
you
you
main
tease.
episode listener fans deserve better than the most cruel thing I could think of to do on the podcast.
Oh, you tease. All right, so be it. Jesse, what is our question for this episode?
Our question today is another Sam question. So, Sam,
thank you, Sam.
Thank you so much. And basically, the question is, how do you do world building without homework? And this is kind of a nice one because we kind of covered this topic very early on.
We did.
Yeah, world building with a light touch.
Oh, why do you say that?
I believe back in season 1.
Remind me, what did we talk about in that episode?
We talked about how to do world building with a light touch, but we didn't actually talk about world building. We talked about how to use existing resources from settings with a light touch. We were young, new to the podcast game, at least I was. And so, yeah, we just talked about what we wanted to, and it was fun.
I don't remember any homework in that episode either.
Yep. Well, we said the players don't actually do the homework. So when you're doing world building, you need to, I guess, have no homework on it.
Yeah, homework sucks, man. And when you're world building, the last thing you want to do is make your players do extra stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
And the last thing you need to do as a DM is do extra stuff.
Don't I know it? That's my biggest problem in role-playing games. I do too much stuff.
I mean, I'm going to ask you this question. I feel like I have before and I know the answer, but are you having fun when you do that stuff?
Yes and no. I'm having fun in the process of initially doing it. I'm not having fun when I realize it's not going to get used. You know,
Fair.
it's like a double-edged sword. It's like it's fun when it's happening and it's not when it's not.
Okay.
What about you?
I mean, like, I don't do much homebrew. So I do have settings I love and I'm trying to convey information. But
does world building have only exclusively to do with like a custom homebrew or a custom setting? Can you not do world building with an established IP and established setting?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose you can, because you're probably going to pick a location and then put your own NPCs in. So I think we should probably define, just to like, you know, give some structure to our conversation, what the elements of world building are. So when I'm talking about it, and correct me if you have a different view of this, but basically world building is creating setting, lore, and context for the game world. That's a pretty quick and dirty definition.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Sure.
Would you include history in that?
No, I wouldn't. History can be written over the course of the game session.
Yeah.
History is one of those things where it doesn't have to be included, but it can be included. It's modular. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. I was trying to think of a question earlier today to ask this, and I tread on some perilous ground. I was just like, so what if you think about, does history say to me as a real person in the world today, like the history of my country? And then I was like, I don't think people actually know that much about it. We just have like a vague sense, and maybe then you can do that. Like, here's a vague sense of important things in history your character probably knows. There was a big war like 200 years ago. People are still mad about it. Okay, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, we have an interesting thing that happens in our modern real life world where without the context of history, everybody thinks whatever's happening right now is the worst thing ever. And it really does alter how we perceive the world if we don't have context.
And I think that would be a really fun thing to put in a role-playing game. Like, let's just have it so the PCs think that everything that happens is the worst thing ever.
I mean, they should. It's the game.
That's why
the
you
adventure that's happening to them.
Listen.
History is a slippery slope when it comes to world building because, my biggest issue, as we discussed earlier, is like, I get really unhappy when I don't use the stuff I make. History is the number one thing you won't use in your games. You will have to shoehorn it in to tell the player characters about the history. And 9 out of 10 times, they're really not going to care about it. It's only really about the here and now for them because the game is, it's playing. It's like we're not taking a history class. We're not watching a documentary. We're not watching fucking Dunkirk. You know what I mean? It's like we are playing a fun game with our friends around a table, drinking drinks and eating pretzels and having jokes and a good time. History is boring in that context. Yep.
And I don't think people, I don't think a lot of PCs need to know history to create a character in the world. I don't think a lot of people usually do a historical pitch. There was this war 200 years ago, and I'm descended from the last of the long line of partisans who fought that war, and everything today is still about that war.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't think a lot of characters do that as a pitch.
I mean, history is really important in my 1 to 20 game that you are a player in. History from the point of view of the creation myth of the world is that, all the original species started out in a Garden of Eden kind of situation, and the humans did horrible things and left and took stuff with them and then eventually came back and kicked everybody else out. And that is important to the overall aspect of the story. But I've been barely talking about it because it's asking too much of the players to pay attention to those kind of details.
Well, we've started seeing things that obviously happened a long time ago where we're like, what? Which is probably the way to do it. I think, too, in the context of your game, and this is kind of a follow-up question, I think of that stuff as more of myth.
Yes.
Are myth and history the same thing? And in, say, a fantasy game, I think in a fantasy game, maybe myth is more important to have living in the setting. And in a sci-fi game, maybe history is more important to have living in the setting.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
But then the question is, what, you got to convey that to the PCs without giving them homework. I think also, too, on that idea of history and myth, that's where a lot of new DMs go wrong.
How so?
Because they think they need to have that. And they get bogged down writing a Bible.
Yes. Even us, veteran DMs still have that problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't. Because
I do. It's fun to use your imagination. It's fun to cosplay as a writer for a couple hours every week. So I think that I agree with you that myth is more important than history, but that's because myth is easier to sum up. Like the historical things surrounding the creation myth that I mentioned are also a big part of it. And because I've done extra work with the player characters behind the scenes, like, listener, the funniest thing about this 5e D&D game that I'm running, where I'm attempting to take, everybody from level 1 to 20, because I've never done that before. So I wanted to dig in with my player characters to go the long haul and like really set up like long stories that are tied into the history and mythology of this world. And the funny thing that I'm mentioning is like I've done the least amount of that work with Jesse. Like Jesse's character, I've done the least amount of background work with. Everybody else I've had long Discord conversations with. And that's why I think this episode is like perfect. That's why I think this episode is different from our world building with a light touch episode, because I feel like I've been living and breathing this over the last like couple of months in preparation and execution for this game, because I wanted these goals of player buy-in, investment in the story and the history and the future of this world, and a grander scale. I wanted some agency and buy-in that the player characters could feel like they have. If you're playing a dwarf like Kurt is in our game, I want Kurt to come up with details about who dwarves are in this world. Even if it's just those run-of-the-mill details that are generic dwarf characteristics that we all know and love, I still want the player characters to venture those things forward and get involved. And I didn't want to do it by assigning homework. So
is there an acceptable amount of homework?
No amount of homework is acceptable in role-playing games.
Really?
Well, okay. Caveat. If your player characters are signed up for that, and to me, that has never happened before. Player characters have never been like, I want homework for this game. I want to work on this in between sessions. That's the only time I think that homework is acceptable.
Okay,
Otherwise,
I think also too, this is a definition question of why I was surprised, because I'm like thinking like if I make like a 1-page, like 5-paragraph, like reference the world or the pitch document, like I would count that as homework just to be, absolute.
Okay. I would not.
Okay.
I would not. Homework implies that you have to do more than just read.
Okay.
I have a shared Google document about the deities in my setting. I've shared it with you, and I'll have it open while we're playing so that I can reference the details about the gods who are involved in this setting. And I can see when people join the document to check it when I start talking about it in game. It's like one of my favorite things. Like when I bring up an aspect
cool, and I'm
of a
sorry
god,
I disappoint you.
it's like I can see the little icon pop up. It's like there's Aaron. He's got the document up. He's looking at it. And I'm like, so.
So, I mean, I think this is a successful minimalist world building. Like, what do you think about the idea of if we were trying to pitch a proposal of like, when it comes to world building, do just enough?
Okay.
How would you define just enough?
I would say only do enough work for your like first arc, whatever that looks like. So in my case, I only did enough for like levels 1 through 5, which is the first arc of this story. And maybe that was too much. But only create what you need. Because as you're doing that, you will start tangenting off into different directions. If your goal is to be like, this all starts at this moment when this knight did this and like cheated on his wife with a priestess and the gods forsake them. It's like, if that's not coming up in your first 5 levels of the adventure, you're wasting your time.
Yep.
If that's not going to be a major detail, it's a waste of time. So only create what you need is what I would say. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, the example you just used, it's Lord Soth for the clever listeners who picked that up. We were just talking about him on our warm-up or bonus episode, whatever we were doing before we started
Banter.
recording, the banter topics. So I think there's a cool thing in Tyranny of the Dragon Queen, I want to say. I should know, I have a rap song about it, but where there's these flames that reveal in each room of this dungeon the actions of this pretty terrifying threat, who is Lord Soth, who, like, if the PCs somehow caught up with him and fought him, I was like, how do I deal with casting Power Word Kill on a 5th level player character? Because he'd be like, you should run, and then they don't. He's like, very well, die.
Yes.
Like,
and cackle while you are doing so.
oh, yes. I don't think Soth finds it funny.
Yeah, but you do.
Oh, yeah, it's fucking hilarious.
You're like, I'm going to take off my NPC character helmet for Lord Soth. This is Jesse. And then just start laughing at them.
Yeah, that'd be fun. I don't think I would have leaned into that history so much if I hadn't. I wouldn't have relished the detail on these visions and the flame if there hadn't been a knight PC who this character is like a natural antithesis of, like, foil to, because one of the things about this knight PC is they constantly question their worth and their validity because of their issue of controlling their anger. Their anger at injustice causes them to lash out in ways that may not be knightly. So there's this fun, interesting bind that's just kind of come up from the elements that were in this pre-published adventure module that I'm rolling with, because there's a younger squire who's had to step up, but who, like, thinks this character is like the bee's knees. And then there's this now Lord Soth, who is an example of a totally corrupted fallen knight who abandoned their duty for their own personal lust and greed. And so it's creating a really cool narrative arc with that history. But if that wasn't going to happen, I don't think it'd be like, you see a knight in the flames and then a skull. Haha. It's spooky down here. That might be all I do.
Interesting. Do you mentioned lore dumps before.
Yeah.
Do you think it's appropriate to just interject lore like that? Like, this is Lord Soth, and your characters would know that going back eons, there was this scandal and the gods, erupted in anger and it changed the face of the world, blah, blah, blah. And
well, we talked about the cataclysm in session 0 because I'm like, this world is defined by the fact that it's been 300 years since the apocalypse and people have just started crawling back out from the, the ash has kind of fallen out of the air in the last 50 years. Like, it's pretty, like, everybody knows the cataclysm happened. It's sort of even 300 years ago, even in human defining. They don't know much about what was before, but they know it happened. And they know that there's myths and fairy tales about dragons and gods. They may or may not believe them because no one's seen a dragon or divine magic in 300 years or whatever. So we talked about that, but the cataclysm itself becomes, the vestiges of what was before will become increasingly present as they journey on.
Gotcha.
So, but as a story that exists in the world, the story of the priest king of Istar or Istar or whatever, that's a thing people know. So when I say a lore dump, I think the new adventure modules are pretty good about this. When they do have someone they call for a history check. If somebody makes it, they know these 4 bullet points, which are each 2 sentences that sum it up pretty succinctly. I've been using those a lot, and that's what I'm calling a lore dump.
Yeah. I get what you're saying. I have struggled with this in the past because I don't know, with the exception of my current group that you're in, I have never really felt that I've gotten a level of investment from my player characters to really interject a lot of lore at the table. And I've tried to think of ways to do that in the past by like, wrapping it up like in songs that are sung in the world, like when they go to the tavern and there's somebody performing and I'm like the lyrics, tell the story of this thing that happened a long time ago. And I'm not trying to say like, hey, remember this, it's important. I'm just trying to add color to the setting. You know what I mean? Instead of just being like, you're in this town and there's this statue of this giant man and he has horns coming out of his head. And there's a story about this man and these horns. It's like, I don't want to constantly be doing that. There's a part of my like inner gamer shame that's like, don't waste people's time. But like, maybe it just takes the right group. Maybe people would be interested in that. I don't know. I've always been too like shy to try it.
I was thinking like at the basic approach, first tier, if you're peeling the onion on this, the first tier of this, I think there's a lot of power as a DM in saying your character knows that figure is a great warrior who once, like defended this kingdom. Right. And you can leave it at that unless they ask another question.
Yeah.
The next layer would, I think, be tying it in with a personal detail. And this is just one way to go. Your character knows because his father told him that this character, or this statue, is this great warlord who was famed for having defended the kingdom, but really was just a repressive dick. That would be the first one.
Right. There's like a family history tie-in.
Or someone in your life told you, or you remember when this person, when you learned about this guy, something that ties it into the character's backstory.
Right.
Or, then you could be like, this is a statue of, your distant ancestor.
Mm-hmm.
Because your father told, like, you can layer these like personal little things that if you're gonna do history, if you can hook it in a personal way to a PC, I think they're going to be a lot more receptive. And then I would call that successful world building.
Without homework.
Yeah. The other branch is, who is this historical figure and what is he famous for? Is the writer's room approach. Mm-hmm. Like, we're building this world together. They say something like, oh, yeah, that's great. And your father also told you about this guy that blah, blah, blah. Or insert name of NPC they care about. I don't know.
Yeah. That is my preferred method, is to describe the statue and say in their hand they're holding a war hammer, or even to say like in their hand they're holding a weapon. What is that weapon and why is it significant? Yeah. So I will give the party like 80% of the important details, and then I will call on somebody at the table and say like, what is the weapon and why is it important? And Jesse and I are huge fans of this method because more often than not, your player characters will give you something that was better than whatever it was you were going to say next. Mm-hmm. At least in my case.
Yeah, no, they're really good at that.
Yeah. Like, player characters are very good at coming up with their own, like, horrific punishments and cool details for the setting. And that's a way to get them involved without giving them homework, is just to do it in the moment.
Yep.
Get them invested that way, right? And then just take notes. Let the player characters... When I first got into Dungeon World, I ran the same game for many different groups because I became obsessed with Dungeon World, and I still am. So I wrote one adventure and then ran it for several different groups in my life. And it always started with the same thing. There was a major catastrophe in this world, and it involved like a significant monster, a creature. What was that creature? And then I'll point to somebody at the table and they're like, it was a dragon. I'm like, okay, it was a dragon, but it wasn't just any dragon. What made this dragon significant? And like the player character, like, he was made of lava. It was like an earth spirit. I'm like, awesome. So was that what caused this, devastating event? It was. And then you just go around the table and just keep like adding to it. And then I would just directly insert that into the game. Like, that's a part of, like, they would get to areas of the world that were like volcanic and you could see the devastation from the creature that they mentioned in this piece of lore that we just made up before the adventure started.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that to be ridiculously effective.
Yeah, it works really well.
Yeah. Have you ever done anything like that to set up a game? Or
Well, yeah, I mean, I've run Dungeon World, and I've run Apocalypse World, and I've run Blades in the Dark. So, like, yeah, a lot of those things I think come fairly naturally to me at this point. I mean, I think I was doing it in the Rifts game a little.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, you gave us influence over like NPCs and
Unforgettable William, Preston Power King. We'll never forget.
Yeah.
The piano playing orc in the town of Los Lomitas.
Yeah, when Jesse introduced my character into the Rifts game, I was essentially part of the posse that was coming up against the player characters. And the lead-in was like, your character is Jesse was basically signaling to me like, your character is going to take a stand here. How does it happen? Which I thought was really cool because it gave my player character an opportunity to be invested in the town, and I was empowered to then start creating details about the people in this town because my character was a saloon bum, and saloon bums are successful drinkers and storytellers.
Yep.
So, I got to kind of shape a little bit of how this town worked, before the player characters arrived.
Yeah, and I will say also, too, if you're thinking about doing that approach, don't do that at a con game. There was a level of trust that I knew the other PCs wouldn't just execute Matt's PC because he showed up with the bad guys.
Yeah.
At a con game where people you don't know, I don't know, maybe you can trust on the goodness and kindness of people to have a shared social experience, but
maybe not.
I wouldn't.
Yeah.
What do you do when stuff comes up, when you're, maybe not, if you've done just enough as a prep method and you're not like working from a Bible, stuff comes up on the fly. Are there any techniques that you use for on the fly responses?
In regards to world
names, places, NPC characters? Because like, I was just thinking like, one of the things I would say about this is like, do not think you can reinvent the wheel. Like the Greeks wrote all the scripts. Do not be afraid to lean on tropes and then twist them. Like in your Dungeon World example, someone said it was a dragon. Okay, classic fantasy trope. But then you can just ask somebody else a question that twists it. What made this dragon eat? Oh, it was made of magma. Okay, now we're kind of off the beaten path a little bit. That's cool.
Yeah. The best thing that I have found is to have a list of character names, place names, some sort of like details that I may want to tie into the story if it comes up. So I will have the name Hobart Montague at the ready because I didn't name the knight in that scene. I don't know why. I just forgot to do it. But then somebody's like, oh, I introduced myself. What is his name? And I'm like, oh, he's Hobart Montague. It's just a stupid fun name. I just had it ready and fire it off. That's the best thing I think you can do is just be prepared and have a list together. What do you do?
Yeah, a lot of random lists. Like just have them accessible. Like, there's lots of great tools. Fantasy Name Generator works pretty well.
Yeah.
I really, really like the like regional, I want to say it's in the back of Xanathar's, but it might be in the back of Tasha's. There's like this list of like 100 like Spanish sounding names, 100 like, I forgot the character's name now, but like I actually got Mateo from the Eberron game, like my character's first name. I got that from the Spanish list because I was reading about Ciri and I'm like, oh, I'm kind of seeing like a Mediterranean Spanish influence there on the southern coast. So I'm going to have this kind of Spanish sounding name. So resources like that. Do you ever use Don John?
No. What is it? What is Don John?
Don John has a ton of generators for mostly old school stuff, but 5e, it's got like dungeon on the fly generators. It's got treasure hoard generators. It's got name generators. And so you can just kind of have it up in a screen and be like, oh, well, his name is Billiam Bartholomew.
Just be prepared. It takes like 5 minutes and a fantasy name generator.
Yeah, when I have a good idea, like when I'm doing my prep, I have a good idea of what's going to happen, where we're going to go. Most of the time, I'll be honest, the idea of like, I still get really uncomfortable with the idea of like the 5-minute bathroom break pause to think. Like I'm like, no, I gotta be on. I'm more creative than this. It's one of the unrealistic pressures I put on myself. But in my prep, I consult a lot of random tables to quickly generate lots of little scratch ideas that I can use again fairly quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely do not put yourself under that much pressure.
What's a session? Can you think of a minimal prep session where you're like, this was a great result?
An example of world building prep was when I had the challenge of one of my players, John, was going to miss like 2 or 3 sessions in a row, and the character had gotten separated from the rest of the party. So the party was forced to go underground, and his character was forced above ground.
Yeah, literally underground.
Because of what had happened in the game. And I was like, I want to reconnect him with the party, and I want to utilize all of these world building elements that I have been seeding, and I want to show them off. So in this world, the gods are present in the lives of mortals. They walk up and interact with them all the time, and only truly remarkable people remember their interactions with the gods. All of the player characters are remarkable people. And once the gods meet remarkable people, they kind of glom onto them a little bit.
Oh, they keep showing up. Oh my God.
Because they like being remembered. They like being worshipped, and they like being remembered. And when human beings remember them, the human gods eat it up. So I wanted to use the element of the nature goddess, who has taken an especially focused interest in John's character for reasons that I have seeded into the adventure. And I had a moment, and I contacted John, and I was like, hey, I'm going to work you back into the game. I need a reason for why your character kind of didn't get involved and follow the party in. You know, what happened? We came up with this story because it takes place underground. He's partially claustrophobic, and it has to do with some minor torture elements from his siblings when he was a kid with like insects. Perfect. So his character kind of had a little bit of a freak out and couldn't join the rest of the party. And then I had the nature goddess come and be like, hey, how's it going? What happened? And he's like, I got separated. And she's like, tell me about it. And he's like, I froze. And it's because of this thing that happened in my past. My siblings used to pick on me, and she was just very sympathetic. And she's like, do you want to rejoin them? And he was like, yeah. And she's like, okay, I'm going to help you find them. Eat these mushrooms.
You have to put the song that you played as that thing, as the trip scene that like turned him into motes of dandelion fluff that blew on the wind to rejoin us. You have to put that song in the show notes so people can listen to it if they want to, because it was one of the best things that's happened on a Sunday night to me in a long time, getting to watch this.
Yeah, so the nature goddess eats magic mushrooms with this character, and then he starts transforming into a plant. She starts transforming into a plant, and he becomes, like dandelion seeds, and she blows him. Well, that's a bad turn of phrase. She sends him into the wind, and he travels and gets to the party. And it's like, I could have easily have gotten him there any other way. I could have just been like, hey, you were with them the whole time. You weren't actually separated. But I was like, no, this is an opportunity to try to do some world building. I'm gonna get the nature goddess involved. There's a reason why she's taken particular interest in John's character. But it's an element to world build.
Okay.
I spent a couple hours on that, which to me is a lot of time in game prep.
Yeah, it was worth it. It was worth every second.
What about you?
Um, you remember the you remember? Well, sorry, because this is a game I killed. You remember when the Soulbound clicked for you when you met that dude in prison?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, that was it. We've talked about it on the show before, but basically, uh, it's this. There's this city called Anvilgard in Akshi, the realm of fire, and it's like wreathed in this permanent fog. Then it's controlled by like basically dark elves, the serpent's coil or the serpents. I can't remember the name of the gang now, but they're the secret power behind the throne.
Mm-hmm.
And so like favors for favors, there's this soul eating good guy that was going to help Maddie with something, but he needed like souls to power him up to do it. And said, it was like, where Maddie's character is like, I don't know, where can I get souls? He's like, well, go speak to the warden of the prison and ask if there's anybody he wants to get rid of. And so he did. And I'm just like, okay, I should tie it into the serpent scale coil. I should do it. And then I should totally like just reveal through this character's attitude that the serpent scale coil or the coils of the blacks or whatever they're called, like that they are very much in charge. Like, so I'm just going to convey through attitude what the lore situation of this faction that I've hinted at its power and existence before. And it worked. It worked really, really well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. My character, I was really starting to feel the character and understand the world and starting to wrap my head around it. And the NPC was really cool. And like my character was obsessed with like, how is this prisoner more free than me?
And then I go and spoil it all by saying something stupid like, let's play riffs.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Okay.
Were there any world building notes from Rifts that stick out to you? Like the first Rifts game?
What was his name? Sir Michael Kors or whatever?
Sir Michael Cross.
Yeah, whatever. So Jesse set up the first Rifts game by saying there's this aged cyber knight who somehow through some way has a connection to your character in this town. He's kind of like looked over them. Yeah, and as your character grew up, you've been gone for a while and you come back and he's looking for help. And Jesse gave us just enough information that if we wanted to take it a step further, we could, which I chose to do.
Yeah, you did. In a way I wasn't prepared for, and I love that.
Yeah. So I feel like Jesse gave us just enough information. And I think this is kind of the crux of like how to do world building without homework. Because homework is, when you say homework to me, it's not about the effort that needs to be put in. It's not about reading or coming up with a backstory. It's about requirement. When you require people to do something, it's like, this is homework. But if you make it light enough and like evoke the imagination of the player to get involved, then it's not homework. The best thing ever is when your player character sends you a message your player sends a message to you over Discord about their character. And they're like, hey, I was really thinking about doing this. What do you think about it? And you're like, I love it. Let's do it. What do you need from me? Like, okay, well, I really think my character should like find this axe that they've been missing. I've been trying to find these lost items throughout the adventure. It'd be really cool to find the axe and have that like kick the whole thing off. This isn't homework,
Yeah.
Like homework is kind of like a state of mind.
Like homework is you need to read pages 150 to pages 270 of the campaign guide to blah, 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 or,
Yeah. It's not homework when you're washing dishes after dinner and you're like, you know what? I think this Michael Kors motherfucker, I think my character has like weird dad issues with him.
I think I'm mad because he fucked my mom.
Yeah. Like, and you're like, I'm going to do this. And then and then you're like, do I tell Jesse? And it's like, no, I am going to have my character be adversarial with Jesse's NPC and put Jesse kind of on his heels about it to kind of like coax the role play of like, what are you talking about? Like, what, you know what I mean? Like to kind of make it weird in the moment so that his NPC is caught off guard, and it shows by the fact that Jesse's caught off guard.
Yeah.
That none of that was homework for me. I've had people be like, hey, we're going to play Exalted. We're going to be using the moon version of Exalted. I'm going to need you to read like this whole entire chapter about their history and what that means. And it's like, you want me to do what? I thought we were just playing a game. Why are you making me read?
Because it's awesome, and it's Lunar's the moon version.
Yeah.
The moon version.
What? I don't know fucking Exalted. It's a cool game. I only played it a couple times.
Cool.
What I did with my players, so-and-so says, I want to play a dwarf. How, Kurt says to me, I want to play a dwarf. What are dwarves like in this world? And I say, well, this world is custom to whatever we want it to be. So give me 2 ways that dwarves are different in this world, and then give me 2 ways that they're the same as a typical generic D&D setting. Like let them choose these dwarven characteristics for you to incorporate, and then also like give me 1 or 2 nuggets of how are they different than your typical stereotypical dwarves, and they'll do the work for you.
The scale of it, like, give me 2 reasons, that could sound like homework, but if you keep it like fairly simple and straightforward and the players feel that they have agency in the game, then that's actually just incorporating them, and definitely a best practice. I think my takeaways would say, like, if you do have to tell existing lore because you've made a purposeful decision about it, introduce it as a way of, this because person told you.
Mm-hmm.
Or do it the other way of like, what do you know about this? And then roll with those ideas. I think those are best practices. Prep just enough. Don't lean on history unless it's tied to a PC's backstory.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I think my follow-up thing I'm going to be pondering after this podcast is, from what you said about Exalted, how do you take these really, really complex worlds that are already built, where if you could get people to do homework, if they didn't see it as a chore, they'd be really, really rewarded by that for the play experience. Sure. How do you do that? I mean, this has nothing to do with the fact that today I realized my sidereal Exalted book, where they're all fate-changing agents of heaven who live in, like, literally in heaven and have to deal with the bureaucracy of celestial gods in their day job. Like, you could do The Office like that as an RPG.
Oh, wow.
Like, it'd be really funny.
To be perfectly fair on this issue, I should have done the reading on the Lunar Exalted. My game experience would have been so much better. Like, I fully concede that. And that came out during play because the other players who had at least read a little bit, or at least understood certain details about Lunar Exalted, caused me to go, shit, I should have read that section.
That is still one of my favorite moments in any RPG I've ever played.
Yeah, for sure.
When Abu Akma challenged me for leadership of the pack and then kicked my ass into the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was so good.
Yeah, and if I had taken the time to read what was put in front of me, my game experience would have been so much better.
I have one example that's doing well. I picked up Aether Knights, which is it's based off the Mecha hack, which is based off the Black hack, but for Mecha. And I got it when I was looking, before the Transformers game was out, when I was looking for giant robot games to play with. So it's OSRE, really rules light, but I was reading the world section of the core rulebook. Right, the setting information. And it's 4 pages and 2 drawings. And you get it.
Mm-hmm.
You get it right away. 4 pages, 2 drawings. 1 page of that is a glossary of terms. And there you go.
Right on.
Like, you don't need a Bible. Take away, take away, take away. You don't need a Bible.
Yeah, for sure.
Bibles actually interfere with the player's agency because then they're afraid to tread on the canon.
Right. Which we covered in our Handling IP episode.
Yes. See Jaunty Mantis, Season 4, Episode 2.
This is why you want to do as little work as possible. Only create enough of what you need. You know, if you're anything like me, you will start tangenting anyway. So just pull it back.
And again, like, if that's fun for you...
It's not productive, though.
Well, yeah, okay, but I'm saying if it's fun for you and you're enjoying it, that is the lonely fun of RPGs other than character creating. If you then get upset that it doesn't get used and it feels wasteful, then don't do it.
Which is the more likely scenario.
Yes.
Because then if you don't use it, you'll start convincing yourself that you should write a novel.
Yeah, and we had a whole season where we said Kevin Crawford's advice about this multiple times. Like, just use what you need for the next session of play. And if you don't use it, put it in a folder so you can use it again later.
Yeah.
Well, Sam, I hope this answered your question.
Yeah, me too. Take a lighthearted approach. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. Don't do too much work. Try to stay away from like assignments. You know, if you're going to engage your player characters, say like, hey, don't think longer on this than 5 minutes. Just, you know, what do you think about this? You know, don't make it a chore.
Mm-hmm.
Homework is a state of mind, so don't ruin the vibe. And with that garbled nonsense comes the end of this episode of the Jaunty Mantis.
Get out there and dinosaurs or some fucking shit.